This demonstration is to show you how to work the backward loop or single thumb twist cast on. It's a fairly simple cast on. Again, start with a slip knot to begin with, where I've got the tail end to the left, the ball yarn goes over the top of the tail yarn, I reach through the loop and bring the loop through to make a slip knot, which I'm now going to place on my right needle. So this is a one needle and thumb cast on, and you can put the slip knot anywhere in the yarn. You don't need a long tail for this particular cast on. I'm holding the yarn in my left hand and I'm going to wrap it around my thumb to make a loop. So I'm simply going to transfer the loop from my thumb onto the needle. Wrap it round, transfer onto my needle. Round the thumb, transfer onto my needle. It's a very simple cast on. It does produce a very soft edge, so it's not necessarily the best cast on for a normal piece of knitting, but there are occasions when you want a very soft cast on edge. What it is very good for is to add extra stitches within a piece of knitting, which I will demonstrate shortly. But you just keep wrapping the yarn around your thumb. I go from the outside to the inside of the thumb, slip the loop onto the needle and tighten. When you've cast on enough stitches, turn the knitting around. The first row can be quite difficult to knit because quite often the stitches feel very tight, but once you've worked them, they're fine. The other thing that you do need to be aware of with this particular cast on is not to pull your hands apart once you've taken the stitch off the left needle. You do not want to be moving the needles apart as I've just done, because if you do, I'll do another one, you start to get this long loop between the stitches. If you have a large number of stitches and you keep pulling your hands apart, that loop can become very long, and you suddenly find that you've got a long loop between the stitches not knitted and the stitches that have been knitted. So when you are working this first row, it is important to try and keep your needles close together as you work the first row. As I say, it can be a little bit tight to get into the stitches on the needle, but once they've been worked, it is quite a stretchy, flexible edge. So again, we have quite a reasonable stretch on the edge stitches. It does work well for lace patterns, particularly patterns where the edge of the knitting has to be able to move into a curved shape rather than a straight edge. So I'll just finish knitting this row, as it's easier then to show you what the bottom edge looks like. So the cast on edge, it's quite a soft edge, but it can make it easier then also if you need to pick up loops. Generally I would use this cast on within a piece of knitting. For example, when making a mitten like this one here, you've got a gusset increase for the thumb, and when you take the stitches, the thumb stitches off, you need to cast on some new stitches to join the mitten into the round again. So in a situation like that, this backward loop cast on is an ideal way to add stitches, because it allows the knitting to continue in the same direction. You don't have to turn the knitting around, cast on some stitches, turn it back. You can simply add the stitches as required and then continue knitting in the same direction. There are other occasions where you might want to use this cast on. For example, I have a design called a ruffle scarf, and I'm just showing you a bit of the scarf here. So this particular scarf needed a very soft edge, partly because the stitches in this section here are dropped once the knitting has reached a certain point, and the stitches are laddered all the way back down to the cast on edge, and by using the single thumb backward loop cast on, the knitting undoes right the way down to the bottom to give you a nice edge for this particular scarf. So that's the backward loop or single thumb cast on.